Back in my quarters, the warmth of the hearth felt almost oppressive, clinging to my skin as I tried to shake the memory of what I'd seen in the Whispering Glade. I paced in front of the hearth, unable to settle, the image of the old warden's final moments haunting me. Dhalâra sat across from me on the floor, her posture calm and composed, as if we hadn't just witnessed something horrifying. I wanted to demand how she could be so calm, but my voice came out unsteady, barely a whisper. How can you just accept that? Watching someone do that to themselves, as a ritual. Dhalâra looked up at me, her expression steady. "It's the way of things," she said simply. I stopped pacing, looking down at her. But it was so, I don't know, awful. And you all just stood there like it was nothing. There is nothing awful about dying. To take one's life and death into one's own hands. It's sick, parading it like that, in front of everyone, like putting on a damn show. It is the way of things, yeah. I know. That or the way of the gods, isn't it? That's what you all say when nothing makes sense around here, as if the way of things can cover over everything. The sight of blood on the snow, damn monsters crawling out of the lake, the world disappearing, having your eye gouged out. I stopped, and there was a silence between us, broken only by the crackling of the fire. After a moment, Dhalâra seemed to hesitate, then spoke, her voice low. "Remember how I told you that my mother brought Ezra and me here when we were little?" I nodded, surprised. Dhalâra rarely spoke about her past. "There's a lot I don't remember," she continued, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I was only 4, but Ezra, she's told me a lot of stuff. About Ulanath, our home deep in the ash wastes. Our father, he left us. But our mother, there was a temple there, a small one, dedicated to Dulanak the Touched. And our mother was an acolyte. Ezra says she was nice and pretty. Half her hair was black, like hers, the other half blue, like mine. She'd call me her little Lara." Dhalâra's fingers played with the hem of her sleeve. "Anyway, she got sick. Not her body, but her mind. Ezra says she'd come home with scratches on her face and arms, talking to things that weren't there. Remember things all wrong. During lapse of clarity, she'd beg her God to spare her mind for the sake of her daughters. But it only got worse." She paused, as if reflecting on the details. "In the end, she knew she couldn't care for us, not when her sanity was slipping away. So she turned to other gods, greater gods. She scraped together what little money she had, bought a cart and Vashir, made her way across the ash wastes, all the way to Valeswood and their forbidden temple. Ezra says it was a terrible journey. We barely had anything to eat. We drank nothing but swamp water, and our mother's mind was growing worse every day. It nearly broke her. But she made it." "That's terrible." "Life can be cruel," said Dhalâra, and gave a shrug, a sad smile lurking in the corner of her mouth. "She begged Azura to take us, to care for us, to raise us under the protection of the Erdun Triad. Azura accepted us, but not only that. She also offered our mother peace, a release from the madness that was tearing her apart." "What do you mean?" "The Whispering Glade." "Oh." "And our mother, she chose it. Like I said, I don't really remember much about that time.
But I remember her there, in that circle, kneeling before Ajora. In fact, it's the first memory I have. Mother taking the fang.
Dhalâra's voice was calm, almost reverent, but I thought I could hear something buried beneath it, a nearly imperceivable tremble, something she was barely aware of herself. She bit her lip slightly and tugged at her sleeve, a flicker of pain twitching across her face.
I remember her hands shaking, her eyes wild. She was laughing, even with tears running down her cheeks, like her mind was tearing apart. But the moment she pressed the blade to her chest, she stilled. I remember that silence too.
Dhalâra's gaze was fixed straight ahead, as though she could see the memory unfold before her.
I cried. I didn't get it. But I get it now. My mother made the right choice. She chose gods who wouldn't abandon her. She chose Ajora and the way of the Erden.
The fire crackled softly beside us, and for a moment we sat in silence. Dhalâra.
Yes?
I'm so sorry to hear it.
It's fine. I was only a child. It didn't make sense to me then. Much like it doesn't make sense to you, I suppose.
But it does now. Makes sense, I mean. Are you certain about that? She nodded.
Mother's final act was an act of devotion.
Her words were beyond me. I couldn't imagine myself able to reach such heights of commitment. Not to anything, least of all to unseen gods. I felt a chill pass through me. Death, offered as a gift, a solution, as if Ajora had given Dhalâra's mother a cure. The idea gnawed at me, twisting in my gut. Where I came from, killing oneself was something whispered about in shame. But here it appeared almost sacred. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And yet, recalling what Ajora had said about struggle and surrender, it almost made sense. I'm glad you told me, I said. Dhalâra nodded once, and beneath her calm exterior, I saw her quiet strength. The certainty rooted in belief so complete, it seemed to shield her from doubt. That belief, however foreign, however unsettling it was to me, had given her a resilience I could certainly admire, even if I couldn't understand it. For a while we sat in silence, listening to the crackling of the fire as our shadows danced across the decorated walls. Outside, the night lay dark and heavy. My gaze drifted to the window, and the curtains I always kept closed. There was a narrow gap, and for a moment I felt like something was watching us, a presence lingering just beyond the glass, peering in.
Oh, I almost forgot,
Dhalâra said, pulling my attention away from the darkness outside. She reached into the folds of her garments and drew out a small object wrapped in a scrap of dark cloth. She held it out to me. I took the bundle, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a small amulet on a thin leather cord, made from a bit of soft, reddish fur, carefully dried and preserved. I blinked, surprised, running my fingers over the delicate silken texture and noticing 5 tiny curved tips that peeked out from one end.
It's for your birthday, she said. The 18th of December.
I couldn't help but smile. It's December, actually, not Demember. She shrugged.
Close enough.
I held up the present, feeling its light weight in my hand. Thank you. Really, it's... What is it, exactly?
It's a, fox's paw,
she said, and rubbed the back of her neck, her face cringing slightly, as if a little bit embarrassed by the situation.
I remembered you said your home city was Foxenberg, so I thought this might remind you of home.
I bit my lip. Didn't have the heart to tell her that the name Foxenberg had nothing to do with actual foxes. It didn't matter. She'd thought of me. She'd made something for me. The gesture was... I don't know. My throat tightened and I blinked quickly, surprised by the sudden sting in my eye. Without really thinking about it, I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around her. I felt her body tense slightly in surprise, but after a moment, she returned the embrace, her arms gentle and careful around me. It was the first time we'd hugged, and for a moment, the weight of everything, of the temple, of the glade, of the darkness of the Erden, faded into the background.
Happy birthday.
I pulled back, my gaze on the amulet I held to my chest. Thanks. I smiled. I think she smiled too. The fire crackled beside us, and in that moment, I felt a strange sense of belonging. Here, in this cold, dark, and foreign place, someone was glad I was alive. The forest was dark and silent, heavy with mist that hung between the trees like webs. Strange glowing dust floated through the air, casting faint colors over gnarled trunks and towering mushrooms. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches reaching for each other like skeletal fingers, clawing at the air. I walked with purpose. My steps made no sound. Shadows clung to me, moving with me, as if they were alive. I could feel them, pulsing and shifting at my command. Ahead, I sensed movement. My prey. A group of small children huddled together, stumbling blindly through the forest, lost and terrified. Poor fools. Their faces were pale, their rags muddy and torn. I could almost taste their fear. It lingered in the air, sharp and sweet. I raised a hand, and shadows lifted from the ground, curling around my fingers like black smoke. With a thought, I sent them drifting toward the children, thickening the mist, twisting their path, drawing them deeper into the forest, isolating them. They were helpless, panicked, looking over their shoulders with wide eyes, sensing me but too afraid to stop. One of them whimpered, his voice breaking in the silence. I stepped closer, watching them with a predator's calm, savoring the way they stumbled, each step drawing them deeper into my grasp. Then I lifted my hand again, and shadows erupted from the ground. Dark tendrils that wrapped around their ankles, dragging them down. They cried out, their voices sharp and desperate, clawing at the earth, pleading for help. Ancient words spilled from my lips, low and rhythmic, in a language that tasted of iron and smoke. The shadows tightened, wrapping around their bodies, choking their screams. They couldn't escape. They were mine. With a flick of my wrist, I dragged them through the forest. their bodies scraping against roots and rocks as I led them deeper, deeper, until we reached the ruin. The structure loomed in the mist, half swallowed by rot. Its walls sagged, decayed and broken. I stepped inside, the air thick with mildew and the sour stench of fear. In the center of the floor yawned a great pit, a gaping black hole, like an open wound in the earth. It breathed, its depths churning with a foul, ancient smell. I released the children, letting them slump to the ground. Some had fainted. Others stared at the pit, their eyes wide with horror. One of them tried to crawl away, his hands scraping against the rotten floorboards, his mouth opening in a silent scream. I lifted my arms, and the incantations poured from me again, low and heavy. The pit began to stir, thick black sludge bubbling up from its depths, oozing over the edges. It moved like something alive, each bubble bursting with a wet, sickening sound. The smell of rot and sulfur filled the room, coating my tongue. One of the children sobbed, his voice breaking into incoherent pleas. I barely heard him. I was focused, intent, my mind fixed on the pit, on the darkness that pulsed within it. I reached out with a flick of my fingers, sending shadows to wrap around him, lifting him off the ground, dangling him over the edge. His fear was sharp. I held him there, savoring his gasping breaths, his helpless struggle. And then I let him fall. He dropped into the sludge, his scream swallowed as he vanished into the thick, bubbling darkness. One by one, I sent the others forward, each one disappearing into the pit, their bodies dissolving, their cries cut short. As the last one sank beneath the surface, I felt a rush of power, dark and hot, filling me. When the silence returned, I looked up and caught sight of a cracked mirror hanging on the wall. I moved closer, my footsteps echoing in the empty ruin, until I stood before it. The face staring back wasn't the face of Emilia. My white eyes gleamed back at me, cold and cruel, lips curling into a slow, knowing smile. I raised a hand to the glass, my reflection moving with me, and my voice slipped through, low and taunting.
Are you confused, child?
I woke up with a gasp, my heart pounding. I sat up, drenched in sweat, clutching the sheets, my hands trembling. I was back in my quarters in the Forbidden Temple, the hearth fire low, casting faint shadows against the walls. But I could still feel it, the darkness, the hunger. I could still taste something bitter on my tongue, like blood or ash, like the sludge in the pit. Just a dream, I told myself. It was only a dream. But the words felt hollow. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I reached for the wine bottle by the bed, pouring myself a cup with unsteady fingers. I drank, the warmth spreading through me, calming the edge of my panic. I drank another, slower this time, trying to steady my nerves. It was only a dream. A horrible, horrible dream. But no matter how many times I repeated it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had seeped into me through the cracks. Something dark and real.